Hey, this is Charles at Willis Racing. I'm going to show a individual the correct way to know what conrod bearings to put in an engine. The main thing that I can say is, if you do not have, or if you did not get a service manual to do this work, the first thing you need to do is get a service manual. Apparently, most people that are attempting to do this type of work are attempting to do it thinking that one size fits all. It does not. You have to have a service manual so you will know the specifications of the crank pin, your conrod, inside measurement. You're not going to be able to do this without a service manual. Now, if you are attempting to do a Gen 1 motor, you need a Gen 1 service manual. If you're attempting to do a Gen 2, you need a Gen 2 service manual. If you're attempting to do a Gen 3, you need a Gen 3 service manual. All the cranks in all of these engines are slightly different. And you need to have the service manual definitely for the conrods. So it's just better to go straight by the service manual and service this engine. So the first thing you need to do is, if you don't have a service manual, get a service manual. So I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna show straight from the service manual, basically how to get the correct bearing size. Okay, here we go. Okay, as you can see, I've got a crank. This is a Gen 1 crank and Gen 1 rods, okay? So let me get a pointer. A screwdriver. Yeah, this should work. So I can point. All right. This is a Gen 1 crank. And here's the Gen 1 service manual, all right? If you look at the crank, I've got it written down for you. This is the generator side, which is the left side. Then you would have rod number 1, rod number 2, and rod number 3, rod number 4, and now you're on the right-hand side of the engine. This is the cam chain side. All right. So I'm just gonna start and go from left to right. And the reason I'm gonna start and go left to right, let me turn on this light here. You see that light shining on this crank? Okay, let me get down here where we can see it here. These are your main bearing. These numbers correspond for your main bearings, okay? Where I have this green circle here, these numbers correspond for your Conrad. And from now on, I just call it rod, because that's what most people call it. They don't call them Conrads. They just call them rods. So they correspond for your rod bearings, all right? Now, if you look really close here, you see where it says, starts with L for left, and then it gives you 1 number, 2 number, 3 number, 4 number, and then it has R for right. So what they just done is they started on the left side and they worked their way across to the right side. So that's why it has L and then R from left to right. So that's the way we're going to work it. We're going to go from left side to the right side. The best way to know what side you're on is left side is the generator. Right side is the cam chain. And you have 1, 2, 3, 4. Each one of those numbers correspond to the rod bearing, okay? Now, let's look in the service manual. This is why you have to have a service manual. If you look in the service manual, let's look at this rod. See where that rod is? There's a code on the rod. And if you can see right there, it says check this corresponding Conrad ID code number. It's going to be a 1 or a 2. So if I go to the rod that is on this crank, you look right there, and this here is going to be, see, rod number 1. So we're going to go down and look. You see the code number on there? The code number on there it is right there, is 2. Don't worry about the letter there. Just worry about that number 2. So when I go up here now, I go back to my service manual to give you how you read that. See where it says Conrad ID is A, okay? You see where it says code? It says a 1 and then there's a 2. So that 2 now corresponds to that code right there. So you look at your book, Conrad identification number. You look at it, that rod, it has a 2 on it. So that's where you want to be. It's 2. That's the code on that number 1 rod. It's 2. All right. So now that we know that number 1 rod is 2, we go now, and remember, we started on the left side, we go to the crank. And see right there the letter? Let it focus in there, focus in there. See the number? It's 3, all right? So we go up here, and that's the crank pin number. That's for that 3, that number 3 references, it's in reference to the measurement of this crank pin that's on this rod. Now, that is up to you, the person that is building, repairing this motor. This is why you have to have the service manual, because now in the service manual, that 2 is going to correspond to the outside diameter of that crank pin. Who's ever building a motor, who's ever putting this engine together, they should have already checked all of that and know that it's good. They should know that they should have already checked all the specifications for their rod, as far as the crank pin, as far as the small end of the rod. They call this the big end of the rod. And then for the crank pin, whoever's putting this motor together should have already measured all that and checked to see if it's good. And the only way that they're going to measure and check and see if it's good is they have to have the service manual, because these are the specifications. So I've checked all of this. I've checked all the specs. So I know the rod is good. I know the crank is good. So now the only thing I need to find out is the bearing that I need to put in it. What color bearing? So say you've checked everything. So that means all of this is good, this is good, everything is good. Now you are just trying to find out what bearing you need, okay? So let's go back and we're gonna start. On the big end, on that rod, there's a number. And once again, the number on that rod, which is rod number 1. And looking at your look, so you will definitely know you're going from left to right. The number I'm looking for that rod is number 3. So I know that my big end on my rod is number 2. So I go up here, I go to that Conrad ID. The code on that rod is 2. Remember that now on my crank pin, I go down, and on my crank pin, this is stamped on the crank. That's that number 3 stamped on the crank. So here I am in the book, crank pin. It's a 3 stamped on that for number 1. Go back over to my crank to double check it, and there it is. So now, let that thing, there it is, 3. Okay, so now I'm gonna go back to my book. If my Conrad diameter that I made and it measured out, everything's checked, this stuff you should have already checked, because this is the number that's on the rod. It's a 2. And if I come down and match it up with the crank pin OD, see right there, and I cross it here, the color bearing I need is a yellow. So on number 1, for my number 1 rod, the bearing that I need, that rod bearing has to be yellow, okay? I'll do it again. Matter of fact, I'm gonna do all of them. So let me go ahead and I'm gonna say yellow, okay? So I know what my first rod bearing is. It's yellow. I then would go down here and look in my code book, you see, and there it is, find it, yellow. That's the bearing that I need. And you make your own, do whatever you need to do, but now I know for this rod bearing, yellow is what I need for this rod bearing, all right? Let's move on to number 2. So number 2, if I look, going left, and remember, I'm going left to right. I was at 3, now I'm at number 2. And so I'm at rod number 1. Here we go. We at rod number 2. So I know right now, by looking at it, my number that's on for this pin, for the rod pin, is number 2. So here I go. I'll go up here and I'll check that crank pin. And crank pin number, you see it right there? Number 2, all right? So, and let me get up here and I'll do it. Number 2 is going to bring you in this category, because that's what my crank pin said. That's what my crank pin, that's what's stamped on the rod, is a number 2 for that crank pin, all right? Now, if I take that rod and I look at that rod, and it also says, see it right there? It says number 2. So my rod is also saying number 2. See it right there? So my rod's saying number 2, and my crank pin is saying number 2. So let's get up here and show you in the book. Here's my Conrad ID. So that's that number. Conrad ID said it's a 2. Crank pin ID said it's a 2. If you cross over under that 2 and down, I need a brown. So I'm gonna take and put a brown. Okay, so that's what I need for number 2. And like I say, you look, it's in the manual. Boom, there's the bearing I need, that brown bearing. Write down that number, take it to the dealer, ask for that bearing, and that's what they'll order for you, all right? So let's move on to, I'm gonna go through all of these. Here's number 3. So if I go over, I done 1, I done number 2. Here's number 3. I go across to number 3, and I got another 2. And as you can see, left to right, I'm still going. I started over here on my left side. I'm still going left to right. So, same thing. My crank pin OD was number 2. My Conrad ID was number 2. I come across to both of those. I'm at brown. So put me a brown. Okay, so I'm at brown. Okay, let's get to number 4. I go to number 4. I look at that crank pin ID number. It says, again, number 2. I go over. I look at my rod ID number. This is number 4, so let me get it. See what that number says down there. Can't quite see that one. It says a number 2. So by now, you should already know, that's a brown. That's another brown. So right there, it's as simple as that. You have to have a service manual to do it. The Conrad or the rod bearings for this crank is yellow, brown, brown, brown. And that's what I need to replace and refurbish this crank back the way it needs to be. But now you got to realize now, you just don't pull this out and do this. I say again, you have to have a service manual. You have to check and see. You have to check and make sure all your bearings, all these, everything is in specification to be reserviced, reusable. If it's not, you need to get new rods. If the crank is so far out of service that it can't be used, and that's this yellow over here, as you can see. Boy, that's tight already. I'm getting to the end. I'm getting to the end of my service on this crank. So when this, as far as what I do is I don't try to send it out or send it back or, do. What I do is, if this motor goes at some point in time and to a situation where, hey, it spins a rod bearing. And like me, say if this motor, I put this all back together 6 months, year, 2 years down the road, because when I do a motor, I keep all of this as a build sheet for that particular motor. So I know 6 years from now, if I sell this motor and this motor goes away on a guy, he can bring it to me and I can say, well, heck, I pull it up in the computer. I say, well, when I put that back together, I used rod bearing number 1 was yellow, number 2 was brown, 3 was brown, 4 was brown. And so boom, now I tear that motor down and see and measure if everything's in spec. If I tear this motor down and say I go in there and it has spun this number 1 rod bearing, well, I'm done with this crank. I'm not going to try to reservice it. I'm going to pull this crank up out of here and put another crank in here because it's done. It's done. It's already at yellow. And so that means that if this thing spins a bearing here, you can guarantee by the time I get it cleaned up and get that bearing resurfaced, or that pin resurfaced, get that crank pin resurfaced and repolished and attempt to put it back together, I'm going to measure it and it's going to be out of service. It's going to be, the bearing is going to actually be maybe 1 millimeter, 2 millimeters too small. Well, I might as well just take this crank here and put it over on the side or throw the thing in the trash, one or another, and start with something else. But that's the way you have to do the bearings. And you need a service manual. As you can see, I went just directly by the service manual to put this together and come up with what I have here. So it's easier than you think, but just if you're doing it, just take your time. Don't try to rush through it. Take your time. The hardest part of this is not this. The hardest part is you didn't see me do, and that is measuring measuring the crank pin to make sure that it's in spec. So and what I mean is so this pin right here, this is my number 1 crank pin. All right. It says it has a 2 on this here. Well, I need to go up here to 2 because that's my Conrad identification right there. Okay. You got to measure this rod, the outside the diameter of it. Inside diameter of it, and make sure it's within that specification. And if it's okay, all right, you set that rod on the side. You then go to your crank pin and you got to measure the outside diameter. So that's how they come up with the number from the factory. They done it from the factory and they put it on here. So the first one is 3. So from the factory. Now this is where this come from the factory. That 3 right there, that is what they are saying. This outside diameter of this crank pin, it says it's what was the number on it? It's on number 1. They said it was 3. Okay, so they said they measured it, and boom, the specification is okay to put into the motor and to use. That was the hard part that you didn't see about putting this together. It's the time that it's taken. And this is where guys don't, they think, I believe some people believe, or they think that you just take and you look at this book and you put those 2 numbers together and you say, oh, okay, it says green. Well, if you didn't measure any of this out, if you didn't measure any of this to see that it was still in specifications to be used. So if you spun a bearing and you pulled it out and say you did take the crank and you had the crank reground, repolished, but you didn't take the measurement of the crank pin ID when you got it back. Well, if you put the same bearing in there, I guarantee you that bearing that you took out, the specs on it now is too small, because the ID number of the crank pin is smaller now because it was remachined. So you're either going to spin a bearing, lose something, or your oil pressure is going to be down. Something's going to go wrong. You have to put this back together by specs. And I believe that some people don't do that. And that's why they end up in the same situation. They end right back up with a spun bearing on a motor, or worse, because they just said, okay, hey, I'm going to take this out and put this in, and it doesn't work that way. So I hope that helped anybody that is attempting to change their rod bearings. Get you a piece of paper and you see how I done it. Label it out, left to right, generator side, cam chain side. There's just no way to be confused doing it this way. Somebody might come in, they'll say, hey, he's doing that like kindergarten. Well, I'm great with that, because I'm not going to get confused. You're on your right side, cam chain side, left side, generator side. And now I know if I look down here at my numbers, there they are. I circle my numbers, and on there, left to right. Well, I know now that first number is for here, the second number is for here, third number is for here, the fourth number is for here. And boom, match them up and get the right color bearing, and you're good to go. So, and you got to realize now, this here in this service manual now, this is the important part. It's another important part. This is for a first gen Hayabusa. Once again, if you're going to do a second gen, you need a second gen service book. You're going to do a third gen, you need a third gen service book. They're all different. Okay? Like I said, I hope this helps somebody out. And if it didn't, you think that, you need some more help with it, I just tell people, give me a call at Willis Racing. And that number is area code 314-956-5465. I'll help anybody do the best that I can to get their motorcycle up and moving. Anyway, thank you. And I'll see y'all later. Bye-bye.